Hey everybody, welcome back to the Engineered Angler. No, I didn't make that lure, but I made all these. And if you'll remember back to the last lure making video, I went ahead and cloned this guy, which is a Heddon Spook, a topwater lure. And if you haven't seen the technique of copying a lure like this, you should go ahead and watch that video. I'll put a link up here somewhere. And in that video, I made a silicone mold so I can make multiple versions of this and do what I want to do today, which is do a bunch of different paint jobs that I think will be a great collection of paint jobs to take out into the Gulf and see if the paint job makes a difference. Does it make a difference how reflective it is, if it's chrome, if it's gold, if it's dark, if it's light? So we're going to go ahead and get those paint jobs on these lures, and I'll kind of fill you in on what my philosophy or concept is for each one of the paint jobs, and eventually, probably next week, we'll get out to the Gulf of Mexico and do some topwater fishing. And my plan is to take these lures and chrome plate all of them but two, the bone color one and the black one. And my process for chroming is actually silver plating. And I've done videos where I've actually done this before, and I'll go ahead and put a link to a playlist in the description in case you want to dig into it a little further. So that means we're going to have 5 that are perfectly chrome, 2 that are solid color. The chrome ones, I want to go ahead and experiment a little bit with them. I want to leave one just all chrome. I'm going to fight the urge to put a bunch of colors on them, but I want to keep them simple. So one is going to be purely chrome, one is going to be purely gold, and I'll show you how I turn chrome into gold. And then the other 3, I'm going to do varied color schemes, trying to leave as much of that shiny chrome showing as absolutely possible. I have a tendency to kind of overpaint my lures. They should look really nice, but there's also going to be a nice differentiation between them so that we can do a little testing on the water. Since that last video, I went ahead and reshaped the wire harness so that I could position the rattle a little farther back inside the lure. Now I could make a permanent jig to make these wire harnesses. I made a printout of the shape and then glued it on this piece of 1/4" aluminum. Trimmed off all the excess paper and then marked off everywhere where there was going to have to be a bend, because I was going to have to drill a hole there. I put a punch mark at each point so I could be sure I could drill a nice accurate hole. Then I took it into the shop and drilled the holes with my little drill press. And then I cleaned up all the holes with a countersinking bit. After labeling it with the shape and the name, I also put down how much wire I would need to make it. Now I could get started on making the bends with my little jig and my bending tool. And it's simple. You make the bend, you replace the tool with a pin, and move on. The last bend is just a kink, and that's so I can make a twist eye at the end. And I'll use this. This is my Twist Tech eye making tool. Once that's made, I can check it against the original, and it's perfect. And I've got 5 right now, and I plan to make 2 more for a total of 7. And as soon as I have those cast, I'll move on to the next step. With these things curing in the oven, let me go ahead and answer a couple of questions that I've had in the comments. The first one is that someone noticed that I'm using the Alumilite casting resin instead of the typical resin that I've almost always used, which is a casting resin from Specialty Resins. And the reason I'm using this is because I ran out of the other one, and I found this at a real reasonable price, and I got it to retry it because I had originally used Alumilite casting resins, but I found them to be really finicky as far as curing. They take forever to fully cure, well, at least to cure enough to be able to put paint on it without it fish eyeing. I always have to do this kind of thing, and which is bake them in the oven for at least a couple of hours at about 150, 170 degrees Fahrenheit. Otherwise, you'll be waiting days and days and days for these to be ready. Am I going to continue to use it? No. I'm going to continue to use the resin from Specialty Resin, which I have a link on my Amazon store for, and I'm not sponsored by them in any way whatsoever. I pay the same price you guys do for that product. And I've been getting a lot of questions about the strength of hardware on lures. I've had a couple of conversations online and a bunch of questions that sort of intermingle. They're all a little bit different, but the essential question is, how strong is strong enough? Do I just use wire for my internal harnesses? Should I use metal plates? All kinds of questions of interesting ideas. But the key to me is that a lot of people are over-focused on the strength of the lure and on the strength of the hardware on the lure. As an engineer, I'm looking at things as systems. And there's a lot of components in our fishing system. The lure is really just the absolute terminal element on the system. So you got to consider the line, the knots you put in your line, any kind of swivels or clips, the fishing rod you're using and how it will behave under load, the reel and the drag on that reel, and then of course the fisherman who has to kind of hang on to everything. So my philosophy in this is to make the lure as light and as unencumbered by hardware as possible. The idea is to have the strength you need with a little bit of factor of safety without having it really overkill. And what I've found in the testing that I've done as far as screw-in eyes is that they're a lot stronger than you probably imagine. And I'll go ahead and put a link to a playlist of all the tests I've run. What I would focus on is the quality of the line you have, the quality of the leader you have, the kinds of knots you use on those two things, and to me, what's possibly the Achilles heel to the system, and that's your hooks. If they're too brittle, they'll snap and you'll lose the fish. If they're too thin, they'll straighten out and you'll lose the fish. All right, so with the last one in the mold setting up, and I've got to clean up this mess. I had a little bit of a spill, but that's why I like to work on glass. This will come right off with a razor blade. So now I'll be sanding off the remnant of the little sprue mushroom, the vents, and the little bit of flashing that we had from the mold. And I'm going to be marking the center of these eyes so I can drill out an eye socket. So I hope you can see that. I can use that mark to center up my bit. And that gives me a nice round eye socket where I can place a nice 3D eye. So I gotta drill the rest for these 4. And I like to fill the little center hole with a little bit of UV resin, just so I don't have a hollow spot back there creating bubbles later on when I clear coat it. And that's quick. I just put a little droplet in there and set it with the UV light. Alright, so this is the 7th one, fresh out of the mold. I really like how nice and glassy this mold is leaving these lures. So I have very little to do. I just have to get rid of a little bit of the flashing and trim off the sprue mushroom. I just got to give them a little bit of a final sanding. I'm going to go ahead and wash them in soapy water, put them back in the little oven to reheat and dry completely. And then all of them are going to get a first coat of clear coat. The kind of chroming I'm going to be doing to these guys is not paint. This is not a chrome paint effect. This is actually silver plating. I'm taking 2 chemicals that have suspended silver in them. When they combine, they actually drop the silver off onto the surface you spray them onto and leave that surface plated with actual silver. And it leaves a really super reflective surface. The key is having a super glossy surface to begin with before you spray on the silver. So that's what I'll focus on off camera. And then when we get back to this, we'll be able to go ahead and start spraying the silver on these guys. And true to form, the resin wasn't ready to accept the clear coat, so I had to dip it in some polyacrylic just to give it a good seal. And then hang it up to drip for a while and put it back into the oven to set that polyacrylic good and hard, and then to finally give it its clear coat. And put it under the lights in the turner to get that final set. Alright guys, it's the next day. These things are set. They've been set since last night. The finish on the clear coat kind of varies from lure to lure. This one looks pretty good. They've got some little micro flaws that I'm not going to worry too much about, but I have to say, not a big fan of the Alumilite casting resin. It really is a pain to get ready for paint. Alright, the next step is silver plating. Let me walk through what I use. I've got my kit of chemicals right here, and I buy this stuff from Angel Gilding, and there's 2 chemicals, the silver solution and the reducer. The silver solution is basically a silver ion solution, and the reducer is the reactant. This thing actually reacts with the silver solution and forces the silver to drop out of solution and lay on your surface. The 3rd chemical that I use is this little sensitizer. You use very little, and that's used to prep the surface of whatever surface you're actually going to silver plate. Even though it's a little bit pricey to get into initially, it's not too bad per lure. If you guys want to see a video specifically about doing this process and the little techniques I use to apply it and get a good result, let me know and I'll do a dedicated video just for that. I'm also going to need my spray gun. This is something I actually made. It actually sprays both of the materials at the same time through different tubes, and they don't combine until they're on the surface of the lure, and that's the key. And if you want to see me make it, I'll go ahead and leave a link down in the description. And of course, it's air powered. Oh, great. The hose just absolutely tore on me. I guess everything's getting old. All right, got a new hose, or a different hose anyway, and I'll lower the pressure to about 15 psi. And you can see the water comes out. To make sure that I've got the same amount coming out of both of these tubes. I've gone ahead and loaded the gun, so you can see there's about 1.5 ounces of the material in each one of these. Since these lures all have kind of varied finish on them, I'm taking the kind of the ugliest one, and I'm going to do a test with it, even though this one's probably going to end up being painted black or that bone color. All right, let's give it a shot. It always starts out ugly and blotchy, but pretty soon it fills in and you end up with a pretty nice chrome. So it's not completely horrible. It's a little bit blotchy. It's a little less than perfection, but realistically I wasn't expecting perfection out of this one. I'm a little concerned with the blotchiness, because that means the chemicals aren't applying evenly. So I might have to play around with the gun or maybe mix some fresh chemicals. But I'll get back to you when we're ready to do them all. All right, it's time to get serious. I got my gloves on. I'm going to be wearing a respirator, and we've got 5 more of these things to go. All right. Oh, that hurts. All right, so I think we did okay. There's definitely some flaws in each and every one of them. I think there's one of them that's almost perfect. The rest have little flaws, and it's mostly stuff from the finish, maybe a little bit from my technique. I'm a little out of practice, but it's looking pretty good. You can see how reflective that is, how nice and shiny it is. We're ready to do a little bit of painting now. So I painted the black one first, since it was the easiest one to do. Now I want to paint the bone color one, but first I gotta actually mix some paint. And I'll start off with a base of opaque white. And to get that bone color, I'm gonna add a little bit of this rusty orange color. It's called Sunrise Yellow, and it's from Creatix. I'll use a little wire loop to mix in the color. And after adding tiny bits of paint a couple times, the color actually came out pretty nice. Looked just like bone. And then it's just a matter of getting it in the gun and giving the lure a good solid coat of this stuff to give it that kind of semi-yellowed white color. I know this solid bone color is really popular, but I need a little something else. I decided to go ahead and put some little random speckles in black just along the side. And I wanted to make this sort of pattern uniform throughout all the lures. So I added the same speckle pattern on the black one, but in white. Now it was time to turn the silver into gold, and I use this Badger Paints transparent orange yellow. It does a great job. And it starts to transform pretty quickly. After a couple of coats, it starts looking really good. And I'll leave this paint alone. I won't add anything but eyes, and maybe a little red on the chin. My plan for the rest of these is to do a very similar paint scheme, but with 3 different basic colors: blue, green, and a bright fuchsia. And all the paints will be transparent. This way you get that candy apple look. We'll start off with the fuchsia. I like to get the color on the face and then across the back, and then we'll do some of that muddled sort of patterning on the side. I'm using a pattern here that's got bigger gaps. This way it'll be a little more bold. And I'll do the same thing with the blue and with the green. And now we add a little bit of red chin to every one of them. After adding eyes to every one of them, I just need to put a mid coat on them, get them ready to clear coat, and get that clear coat on. Alright guys, nothing left to do but clear coat these guys. What possessed me to do 7 lures in one video? Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get that done and leave you guys with the slideshow of the finished product. Some nice crisp pictures of the results. And if you want to see me make one nice lure and test it, check this video out. And I'll see you guys on the next video.